I'm going to tell you a bit about the role that NHS Scotland plays in addressing the climate emergency and consider both the impacts that the Scottish Health Service has on climate change and the impacts from climate change on the service itself. As far back as 2009, the World Health Organization and the Lancet recognised climate change as being the biggest global health threat of the 21st century. So the NHS has been working under the auspices of a climate emergency for nearly 12 years. Climate change impacts directly on the health, both physical and mental, of the Scottish population. An increase in adverse climate events like flooding brings an increase in associated physical injuries and mental trauma. Poor air quality, which is caused mainly by transport and building emissions, accounts for around 2,000 premature deaths each year in Scotland. And an increase in heat-related illness and mortality could become a future problem for Scotland, particularly for our most vulnerable patients. Aside from the health impacts that climate change will bring, NHS Scotland as an organisation itself has a big impact on Scotland's aspirations to be a net zero nation. We manage a huge and complex estate, around 1,500 buildings, which includes hospitals, health centres, offices, residential accommodation, laundries, depots, every type of building really. All of this contributes to around 400,000 tonnes of greenhouse gas emissions every year. We generate around 50,000 tonnes of waste every year. We operate over 9,000 vehicles, and these cover over 127 million miles every year and generate over 60,000 tonnes of greenhouse gas emissions. And we procure around £2.7 billion of goods and services every year. All of these carry an environmental impact. The environmental impact of pharmaceuticals is of particular concern to us. Since 1990, which is the baseline year for the Climate Change Act in Scotland, our estate's greenhouse gas emissions have reduced by over 62%. That's well ahead of Scottish national targets. So we've changed the fuel we use, we've upgraded our energy centres, we've changed our lighting, we've carried out a host of energy savings projects. In terms of waste reduction, we've implemented a large number of projects. We produced the NHS Scotland Food Waste Reduction Strategy to reduce food waste by a third over 5 years. We've changed the specification of plastic medicine cups, clinical waste bags to increase the recycled content of the plastic used, and that saves about 600 tonnes of virgin plastic every year. We work with a company called Warpit, which enables NHS boards to reuse their equipment and their furniture, and that saves over 800 tonnes of physical waste and over 1,000 tonnes of associated greenhouse gas emissions every year. And across our hospitals, small local actions by our staff are increasing recycling rates every single year. In 2018, we developed our Sustainability Action branding and campaign. The purpose of Sustainability Action is to promote awareness of sustainability and climate change within NHS Scotland and to demonstrate its importance for all of our stakeholders. The branding is now being used across all of our health boards and a range of local campaigns. But we need to do much, much more if we're going to meet Scottish Government climate change targets. Much of what I've already described has been sustainability by stealth. So most of our patients, our staff and visitors won't be aware of the changes we've made to things like our energy plan or our lighting or to equipment specifications. Our existing achievements have been made with no adverse impact on patient care or on staff's day-to-day work and with very relatively little dedicated funding. But meeting net zero targets can't be done by stealth. This will need everyone's input, from our chief executives to our patients. In 2019, the NHS Scotland chief executives made a series of commitments in response to the climate emergency declaration. And these are, number one, that NHS Scotland's going to be a net zero greenhouse gas organisation by 2045 at the latest. Number two, all NHS Scotland new buildings and major refurbishments will be designed to have net zero greenhouse gas emissions from April 2020. Number three, each NHS board will undertake a climate change risk assessment and produce a climate change adaptation plan by the end of 2021. Number four, NHS Scotland transport emissions from its owned fleet, that's small and medium vehicles, will be net zero by 2025, and our larger fleet will follow by 2030. Number five, the NHS supply chain will be reviewed to determine the extent of associated greenhouse gas emissions and environmental impacts. And then we're going to look at how we can minimise that impact. And number six, each NHS Scotland board will establish a climate change governance group to oversee their transition to a net zero emissions service. This is going to require extensive resources, both in terms of funding and in staff. It's going to require more and better collaboration with other organisations and partners, particularly colleagues in local authorities and in our supply chain. Climate change does not recognise organisational or geographic boundaries, so the NHS cannot work in isolation in tackling this issue. Now, if we get this right, the benefits to health as well as the environment will be immense. At the start of this presentation, I mentioned the World Health Organisation's and Lancet's statement from 2009 where they identified climate change as a global health threat. 6 years later, that same commission changed the nature of their message to read, "Tackling climate change could be the biggest global health opportunity of the 21st century." So help us to embrace that opportunity.
Hello, my name is Stuart Stevens and I'm an Assistant Chief Officer with the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. An increased risk of wildfires, severe weather events and flooding are just some of the predicted impacts of climate change, and the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service will undoubtedly be on the front line responding to these types of incident. As one of the largest fire services in the world, we are working hard to reduce our own carbon footprint, and I'll come back to this shortly. Fires by their very nature release significant quantities of carbon into the atmosphere, and so the most effective way to mitigate this is to prevent those fires from happening in the first place, and there are a number of steps we're already taking here. Wildfires can burn for prolonged periods of time and draw upon significant emergency service resources and are physically demanding and dangerous environments for firefighters to operate in. They're a major threat to our wildlife, landscapes and rural communities. We're reviewing our approach to dealing with wildfires, and we've developed a new strategy to help tackle these more effectively. This strategy sets out how we will invest in the provision of new specialist resources, technological advancements and forward-thinking operational practices to enhance our response to these events. Beyond wildfires, we will continue to work with communities and partner agencies to ensure that fires within the built environment are also prevented. Climate change is predicted to increase Scotland's rainfall, resulting in more severe and wide area flooding. As we have seen from last year's summer floods, these can have a devastating impact in only a matter of hours. Again, SFRS have invested heavily in this area, and we have 66 flood response stations strategically located around the country, supported by a further 20 swift water rescue units. We also have a number of high volume pumping appliances strategically located across Scotland, which can divert a huge amount of volumes of floodwater. As I mentioned earlier, we are working hard to tackle our own carbon emissions. Our first carbon management plan has been developed and published by our sustainability team. This plan looks at our fixed assets like electricity and heating in our buildings and our mobile assets such as our fleet of vehicles. We have invested heavily in low emission fire appliances, electrical vehicles and associated charging infrastructure. As a service, we are fully committed to achieving our pledge to reduce carbon emissions by 6% each year over the next decade. This will contribute significantly to our strategic aim of doing more for Scotland.